Hi guys, welcome to this brand new episode of SYNCROMYSTIC. I'm here with my colleague Wayne McCroy of the Alchemical Tech Revolution, and today is episode 10, and the Pope is apparently dead. He happened to die on a very significant day, and if you can't see the synchronistic metadata in that, then you're looking elsewhere. That clearly was designed on purpose. Now, whether you take that to mean a energy from elsewhere is designing this place and that's actually happened, or it was announced on that day for a reason and he's been dead a few days, it really doesn't matter so much. What a strange time we're living in. We just said, Wayne.
Oh, absolutely. Hello, Richard. Good to talk to you, my friend, once again. And this is episode 10, and we are living in some very interesting times. The Pope is dead. The Pope died on Easter Monday, 4/21, 2025, 9 years to the day that the pop star Prince died. That's another
Oh, hey.
interesting connection that nobody's putting together, but you could always correlate these things back to one another. And of course, it it just screams in the metadata field out there about all of this stuff. There is some type of planning that goes on. Now, whether you believe that's human planning or beyond human intelligence planning this stuff, that's open for debate. I would argue that there seems to be a beyond human intelligence that guides and directs a lot of this stuff. And of course, we see the way all these things align in the mainstream media. And of course, it's all over the place now. They're celebrating this Pope right and left everywhere, saying what a good guy he was. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with that assessment. He's done some irreparable harms to the world with some of his policies. And of course, he's the first and only openly Jesuit Pope that
Mm.
we have had. And there's always those connections back there to the secret society groups. And of course, they espouse the Luciferian doctrine at the end of the day. So this was instantiated into the papacy in Rome openly for the first time. Now, this has been going on since at least the Renaissance, where the papacy and the Vatican have adopted Kabbalistic practices and ideals into their belief systems. So all of this has been going on, and there's a great resource for this. Michael Hoffman wrote a book titled The Occult Renaissance Church of Rome, and I would recommend people pick that up if they're interested in exploring the connection to the Kabbalah and the Kabbalistic practices being attached to the Church of Rome and to the Catholic Church in general, and how these ideas have been espoused and promulgated by the mainstream religious structure. And this Pope was no different in doing that. So, certainly, we have this going on. And this was the first time that they openly admitted to having Jesuits and Freemasons and stuff like that in these offices within the Vatican, and where they openly had a Jesuit Pope, which was never supposed to happen. And then, of course, you could go back and look at some of the predictions that have been made, some of the prophecies that have been put forward in the past by the likes of Father Malachi Martin. And you can see how this is all adding up to what is predicted in the last days or the end of days. This is supposedly either the last pope or the next pope will be the last pope, depending upon how you count that. So we see, according to their old traditions and prophecies, that this is the case, that we're entering into this time of the last pope, otherwise known as Petrus Romanus, Peter the Roman. And of course, this is an allusion back to Saint Peter in some regards, but it's also an allusion to something else that's going on. And are we indeed looking at the installation in the coming days of the last pope? I think there might be something to that, Richard. What's your take on all of it?
Well, it's all fitting in this timeline, isn't it? The speed on which this thing is picking up. So maybe we'll put this down at the start and sort of give them the context. So, in the context of this messianic agenda that we've been speaking about, that runs alongside or runs right through the heart of all of this stuff, in terms of playing these biblical narratives out, regardless if you think that there's another power behind it or humans are doing it. We're going in that direction. Um, it the main thing that they needed in any story is a good guy, bad guy. Now they've cast us, the West, in my opinion, Rome, the Edomites, as the baddies. We need to fall. Now there is and I didn't know this till Wayne pointed it out, and I get most of my information from Wayne about this stuff. Is that it fell twice? I didn't know that, and that was so interesting to me because I was always speaking about Rome clearly hasn't fallen. You see it in the Seven Hills of Washington, D.C., Rome, Maryland. John Pope was the guy that gave them the land of that. The architecture's there. The Capitoline Hill is Capitol Hill. Rome is clearly there. Now it makes all sense. And it wasn't until last week we did the show, episode 9, that it made sense that, okay, that's why it's still there because it has to fall again. So what we're seeing, I believe, in the alternative media now is the Russell Brands of the world, the Candy Sowens of the world, Alex Jones of the world are proclaiming to be Christian. Now, Donald Trump's been doing this for ages. Clearly, he's not Christian. He's of the Jewish faith. And there's arguments as to what he's doing. He's Chabad, quite clearly, which are these messianic guys, which also is Putin and Netanyahu and possibly Zelensky, but definitely those three: Putin, Netanyahu, and Donald Trump are Chabad, and these guys have this messianic, Kabbalistic, Lurianic agenda down to a T, and it's even on their website if you know what you're looking for. So they are doing this, but they needed a baddie, and they need us to believe we are the Christian Romans. And I think what's happened, and I like to hear Wayne's take on this, is that because that Christianity has slipped away over the last few hundred years here in the West, and we don't tend to be overly Christian in most parts, they've needed to foster that and bring that up. And I actually was sitting with David Icke at the weekend, as you do, at a kids' party. That's weird. And we were sitting there chatting about this. What's Candace Owens' role in this? And it occurs to me now that because she's against her bad. They've all gone after her. This Shmuley guy's gone after her. She needs to be leading the Christian faith there. And that's why she's turned to the Catholic faith. Her husband was part of Turning Point UK, which are deeply behind Israel and pushing the Israeli agenda. So I see her as someone who's gone in there. Let's set her up with our Shmuley guys to seem like she's someone to trust. And she's deeply against these bad guys. She touched on it briefly for a second, then left it alone. RFK is deeply involved with them guys. I can see these two sides, the East and the West, or this Edomites, which will be us, which is the line of Esau and Cain. And they believe, anyway, this is their beliefs, not my beliefs. They need us need us to believe that and accept that. And they are the line of Adam and Eve, of Seth. And they need that duality. There's Star Wars, and they can't have it without casting us as the baddies in their inverted dark and light Kabbalistic story, which is total nonsense. And what they want to do is absorb the light of us, all of our energy, into the moon. We're the sun, they're the moon. We're the sun cult, Rome, into the moon and reflect it back at us and become the shimmering darkness. And this is all Kabbalistic symbology. If I've said anything that makes sense there, Wayne, let me know. What do you think?
Well, it all makes sense if you understand their belief systems. And what this actually is this is the inversion principle applied. Because technically, if you go back and you look at their own historical accounts and semi historical accounts of things, it should be the other way around. And this Chabad cult, if you want to call it that, these are the guys that actually are the ones of the line of Cain, the lineage of Cain. And they're trying to invert that and flip the roles upside down here. And this is the true definition of Satanism, if you want the truth behind it, the inversion principle. So they're applying that. And of course, this goes back to the ancient archetypes. And you could go all the way back to the story of Cain and Abel. Cain, the sons of Cain being the philosophers of fire, and the line of Seth, which was the replacement for Abel, being the sons of the waters of faith. So they've kind of tried to reverse these roles now and apply the archetype to us rather than them to flip it all on its head. So I know it might be a strange way of thinking for a lot of people out there, but this is most certainly what they believe. They're all about the unification of opposites in this Kabbalistic type worldview that they have. So it's all about this union of opposites. And that's what they're attempting to do here by flipping all these things on their head. And they're trying to really affirm their grip on power in this way by applying these archetypes in the opposite direction from where they were. And they see this as being a good thing. And certainly I understand what you're saying. And I think this is all part and parcel of the program here. You see, they had to bring the West back from its point of departure from Christianity, on which much of the West was founded, and try to get us back into that mindset, into that way of thinking, going back to our traditional values and the core of our civilization. They wanted us to reattach to those ideas. And how have they done this? It's through years of social engineering, steering us directly away from all of those spiritual concerns and leading us down the path of hypermaterialism. Well, this always invariably leads over the course of generations to a turning back to the faith. And we see a lot of people here in America and in the Western cultures in general are turning back to the faith in Jesus Christ, in Christianity, because this is the core foundation upon which our civilization has been built in the modern era in Western culture. So they've turned back to this. They're beginning to recognize that the world is in a fallen state. It is really in a state of degradation because of our abandonment of traditional values and morals and ethics. So people are turning back to that. So just like everything else, these people in control, these dark occultists who run things and their minions, the technocrats beneath them, they have to provide us with a hero in order to usurp and control this whole grassroots type movement. So this is how they do things. So they'll give us a hero, and then they install guys like Russell Brand and people like Candace Owens into these positions of prominence within the alternative media, which, by the way, is by and large just as controlled as the mainstream media these days, with the exception of a few stragglers on the outside like us. But by and large, what you would consider the mainstream alternative media is controlled opposition at this point. So you're talking all these people who somehow get a massive audience, even though they talk about things that don't really account to much. It's all about talking points. And this is how they get the influence and control. They have the algorithms working with them to present them in the main frame of reference for people looking for alternative information. So you get these people front and center, and this helps to influence this direction back towards what you would call a new type of renewed faith. And this, of course, aligns completely with the representation given in the book of Revelation and in all the books talking about eschatology and things of that nature. So all of these ideals align with the blueprint that they're operating by. And you could use the argument if you'd like. You could say, well, they're using it as a blueprint, and this is why it's important. Or you could hold to the viewpoint that this is prophecy being fulfilled. And both of those things are true. And it doesn't matter what your take is on this. You could take it to the bank, look at the Bible, the things written in the Bible. This stuff is coming to pass before your very eyes, whether you want to admit it's prophetic or not. It is, even if it's a type of self fulfilling prophecy and they're using it as a blueprint for operation, it's still coming to fruition. So you better pay attention. In fact, I think it gives more credence to these things that were written down because of that facet of things. But the important point here is we're seeing how we have a turning back towards spirituality in a more massive way here in a lot of Western cultures that is arising, and they're trying to stamp this down and turn it into something that it's not. And that's the whole point here. They're trying to usurp this whole process in order to reestablish or to firmly ensconce their control of this system. And of course, it has everything to do with setting up their new digital control grid, which they most certainly want to do. And they'll use these archetypes, these religious icons and iconography to do so. And we're seeing a lot of strange things rolling out there in front of you when in terms of the imagery of it all. And the image is an important concept here. And we see that in spades being presented now with this death of the Pope. And it's all out there in public mainstream everywhere where you're seeing about this, and it's in your face for the past 2 days, 24/7. And there's an importance behind this archetype, and they're using this to steer the world attitude, the public consciousness in a certain direction. And it has to do with usurping this new reawakening of spiritual concerns in Western culture and reapplying it and redirecting it and leveraging that energy towards something else. And what exactly that is, we could debate about that. But certainly when you look at some of these people who are sitting in the political positions of power right now, you can see how it aligns with these Chabad principles. When you're looking at it, when you look at the Kabbalistic principles that they espouse and they believe, they're bringing this stuff into central focus for those who are seeking out spiritual concerns. So they're trying to actually hijack your thought process and steer you towards these Kabbalistic or Gnostic type principles in your concerns about spirituality. And they're trying to actually invert Christianity on the face of it to bring about this new image that they have of man and of God. And of course, this will correspond to the new transhuman image that they most certainly want to apply here. And we could see some of the other things going on in society at large right now and understand how these things connect. And perhaps we'll go there in our upcoming discussion here, Richard, but I'd love to hear more about what you're thinking about this.
Well, we've got the symbology has been there since the COVID thing. The whole rainbow Noah Hyde laws has been there. They used it during COVID. You've got Tucker Carlson who claims he's Christian. He's on his knees praying with Russell Brand on stage, and he's saying openly that the Noah Hyde laws are a good thing. How he comes to that conclusion when he knows the God that you will have to bend your knee to is not the God of the Christians at all. Clearly, so they're absolutely in line with this Noah Hyde Law's messianic agenda. Absolutely. And the West needs to play its role as Rome, the Roman Empire, to fall again to for them to get their revenge. And it absolutely all fits in. So let's go over to then. And so the Pope dies on Easter Monday. How, yeah, as if that actually happened. But again, who knows what's going on up there if they've actually pulled the plug on him on Easter Monday? Who knows? But the fact is, the symbology, the metadata is there. So we have a couple of people here that we think might be in line for the next Pope. And there's a chap called Raymond Leburc, which apparently appears to be Donald Trump's pick for various reasons. And perhaps we'll look into him at some point. And there's a guy that you sent over called Peter Edroff. He the name Peter seems to be very important in these last days. Again, this is back over to you, and I'll shoot it back over to you because you're the expert when it comes to these things. Peter, why does it need to be Why does it need to be Peter for the last pope?
Well, this all falls back to that notion of Petrus Romanus, which translated to English means Peter the Roman. And of course, there's all kinds of prophetic things that have been put forward in the Catholic Church specifically about this. And there are many an expert who are saying that this will indeed be the last pope, and that the things that are talked about in the book of Revelation will come to pass with the rise of this last pope. And perhaps this is the ushering in of the notion of Antichrist into the world. So we have Petrus Romanus, Peter the Roman. And if you look at the synchromystic metadata attached to all of this, it's been extremely prevalent in the zeitgeist out there, Richard. We covered some of this in the last episode. Things like the genetic engineering of the dire wolf as a symbol of Rome, and of course, the names of those wolves, Romulus and Remus. It would seem that they've made this Roman iconography front and center in the programming language that they're using. Now, starting out the year of 2025, it had appeared as if they were using Egyptian and or Middle Eastern types of motifs as the synchromystic programming language of the year. But it seems that sometime in the Ides of March, not coincidentally, they shifted this programming language over to these Roman ideals. And we see the arisal of the foundation of Rome out there everywhere, out in the information field. And of course, I'm talking about one of the cues was this story about the re-engineering of dire wolves, an extinct species. And we talked about this back on episode 9. And it was the names of those wolves that really stood out to me: Romulus and Remus. Now, just a couple days after we published that episode, Richard, I don't know if you looked at this or not. Well, there was a news story came out on Inside Edition that was talking about Elon Musk and his newest child. He wasn't sure if he was the father of, but they did genetic testing, and it turned out that it was 99 point something percent accurate that Elon was the child's father. And you know what the child's name was? 7-month-old baby. You know what they named him? Romulus. I'm
No
not
way.
kidding. You can't make this stuff up. It's out there. And Romulus. And this was after we had published Synchromystic episode 9, that this came to the attention of the news media, and it was out there in mainstream news media. So they're really pushing this idea about the foundation of Rome, or the refoundation of Rome. Babylon the Great has fallen, as it says in the book of Revelation, chapter 14. This is all part of the programming motif that they're using. So, did we indeed see the first fall of Rome with the death of the Pope? And now we're seeing the refoundation of Rome a second time right now when they install the new Pope, and we have the arisal of this reemergence of spirituality here in the West. Is that the new Rome, which is scheduled to fall again, according to these Chabad guys? And of course, according to the Kabbalistic tradition. And if you look into eschatology from any mainline religious source, or even in other contexts, you find the same archetypes present again and again. So Babylon, as described in the book of Revelation, may be referring to Rome, and you could see how they've ported the symbology over, and it's extremely prevalent out there in the metadata field right now. So I find it compelling that one of the main candidates that they have in mind for installation as the new pope is actually literally named Peter. Peter Erdo is the guy's name. And I think this is most likely going to be your candidate for the next pope. So I think there's something to be said there. And I do reserve the right to be wrong on this, but the synchromystic metadata points in that direction. And I have other reasons for believing that might be the case. I don't know much about this guy. I know he's Hungarian, and I know he's been around for a while. And he was one of the youngest guys ever ordained into being a cardinal or some such thing in the Catholic Church. But I think he's more traditionalist in his viewpoints, of course, according to Catholic theology, than was the current pope, or the now deceased pope that we just had. So we could be seeing a shifting back towards maybe some more strict ordinances within the Catholic Church. So we'll see what happens with all of this. More strict stances on things, more traditionalist stances on things from the Vatican. Now, the Vatican is up to its neck deep in controversy and everything else with all of these other places of prominence in this world. So be interesting to see where it goes from here. But certainly, you could see the information out there in the greater data field when you look at it. It's all about these Roman foundation archetypes being presented. So they're trying to build something. Let's put it that way.
Wow. Honestly, I'm reading this. Um, what you've just said, I had no idea about this. So Romulus is his 13th baby, possibly 14th. This is absurd. So this is giving it some prophecy type level. So this is in the Economic Times, come out 7 days ago. According to St. Clair, which is the lady, Ashley St. Clair, she's only 26, the name wasn't chosen on a whim, Romulus. In fact, she alleges Musk encouraged her to pick a name the very first time they slept together. What a weird
Interesting.
thing to what a weird thing to say. Um it, yeah, that's not the sort
Oh,
of bedside chat. Yeah. Go
by
on.
the way, Richard, maybe you should go ahead and watch that Inside Edition. It's only like a little 2-minute clip, but it talks about how Elon Musk is actually in very much the same way Jeffrey Epstein has done. He wants to go ahead and breed and create this new race of people to survive the apocalypse. Like that's what he is like literally on air saying. This kind of thing, when the apocalypse comes, he wants to do his part to repopulate the earth, and that's why it's being declared by this Sinclair lady and others that he's actually reached out on Twitter and is looking for women to procreate with and stuff like that. This is what their claim was in that news story. And keep in mind that probably this Sinclair lady, probably not some random pick. Look
No.
at the last name Sinclair. This is one of the Illuminati family bloodlines of prominence that's come up in Fritz Springmeier's work as well as other places. So there might be some connection to that, going back to this archetype of the family bloodlines, royal bloodlines, relating back to the lineage of Cain and all of these things. And certainly we can understand what's going on here. So we have these strange type correlations between what's going on with Elon Musk and the things that were happening with Epstein, what
It,
Epstein was looking for, the genetic modification, the transhuman notion of things, and this reproduction of all of these human beings. And of course, look at the pick of the name. Like you
yep.
can't make this stuff up. And like this just floored me when I actually heard it on the TV. My wife was watching Inside Edition, and this was a couple days after we posted that episode of Synchromystic. And I heard it talking, oh, well, they're talking about Elon Musk. What's going on now? So I listened, and it was talking about this lady came forward and said he propositioned her on Twitter or X or whatever he wants to call it now, which, by the way, we'll have to do an entire show on
Yeah.
X, on the letter X and its symbological meanings. But at any rate, so it came on and it was talking about this and how he wanted to breed a new race of human beings or something like that. And then what really floored me is they came on and they said that they did a paternal test and that this baby, which is now 7 months old, does appear to be Elon's baby. And it showed a picture of him holding baby Romulus, and it puts the name Romulus right across the screen there. And I almost fell out of my chair when I heard that, because I knew we're on to something with this whole synchromistic metadata thing as far as that goes. So there you go. You got it
Mate,
here first.
it gets even more bizarre. It fits in exactly what I was saying about Juliet Bryant saying she woke up under Zorro Ranch, the filling in of tunnels on Epstein Island. So this baby was conceived. Where do you think the baby was conceived?
Hard to
She
tell.
Well, she claims they laid the groundwork for the baby conceived months later on a romantic getaway to St. Bart's Island.
No kidding.
St. Bart's Island. St. Bart's Island, I've been talking about for ages. It's 50-minute flight from Little St. James. This island has underground submarine ports all over it. This is the island that P. Diddy was on a lot. This is the island that Epstein was on with I forget his name, one of the that'll come back to me, one of the UK politicians. Um this I've been saying for ages that underwater from St. Bart's, St. Thomas, and Little St. James, which is Epstein Island, and probably next Necker Island as well, which is Richard Branson's, are all connected via submarine ports. What's the chances of her conceiving Romulus? And you said 7 months. They've waited for 7 months, which is a important Kabbalistic number, because that's the end of the 6 days of creation, the 7 days, the rest. So they've waited there. There's absolutely no chance that that's a coincidence that was conceived on St. Bart's Island. He spent New Year's Eve at St. Bart's last year as well. I remember reporting about this. That island is massive for what's going on, and it's all going on underneath the island, underneath those surrounding Caribbean islands, and it's all going on underneath Zorro Ranch. And I keep saying this is connected to Trementina Base in New Mexico. What you're saying about taking these young girls' eggs and breeding. This is absolutely, I'm more convinced than ever. I'm actually doing a video about this week that that's exactly what they have been doing. You've got all of these transhumanist guys connected to Jeffrey Epstein. All of these, George Church is another guy that's massively connected to this, all appearing that. Juliet Bryant swears that she woke up paralyzed and naked underneath Zorro Ranch, and she says that they're taking their eggs to fertilize a race. And I completely agree with what you're saying. Now, look into the Kabbalistic element of this. Elon Musk wants to go to Mars, allegedly. Now, when you really look at this, Mars is the fifth planet in the Kabbalah. There's a book out there that I've just done just done a video on, which is a sci-fi book by a guy called, I want to say, I should know this because I did it last week. Um, the book is called, let me have a look. I'll find that out. I've done so much stuff and so much information. It's hard to get your head around. Um, the book basically is a sci-fi book. He's called the guy that wrote it is the father of cryonics, which is cryogenics. Cryogenics is a process. Cryonics is the actual freezing of a body. If you put the father of cryonics into the internet, you'll get his name come up. He wrote a book, a sci-fi book. Not a book, sorry. Yeah, it's Robert Ettinger. He wrote a book and also wrote loads of articles that went in sci-fi magazines. Now, he's the father of cryonics. He came up with this idea in 1947, by the way. It was released in 1948. Now, this book is about taking people and creating the cryogenically frozen being out of this very rich person who comes back, and then when he comes back 300 years later, they realize they've got rid of the definition of God, the fear of God. So the only thing that they fear now is actually repercussions for their past behavior 300 years ago, and then they have to physically go through it when they wake up 300 years later. And guess where they get sent for punishment?
Let me guess, Mars.
Mars, yes, the planet of judgment. And guess who takes them to? Who else is a character that takes people to Mars in a von Braun book? Nazi character, Nazi scientist.
Well,
Elon.
that's the name of the leader in the von Braun book. Elon was the leader of Mars, the Mars colony.
This all fits together. Mars is the planet of judgment in the Kabbalah. So I think these work on two levels. I think they're physically trying to do it and they're metaphorically trying to do it and using the Kabbalistic terms. They're trying to bring this stuff to life. Um, so he wants to take people to Mars. What he really means is he's the warden taking you to your final judgment. That's what the Kabbalistic undertones of all this is. Iron is the um, iron is the element of Mars as well. So he is Iron Man. He's Mars Man. He's in the Iron Man films. The new Captain America film is called Brave New Day. They're telling you so much stuff right now that this is speeding up. So there's even more connections there to do with this. But I think you're right. They're seeding a race to try and basically survive. I think he thinks he's doing the right thing. I think Elon Musk thinks he's going to repopulate the planet elsewhere, and he knows of this Kabbalistic story. He's the Mars man, but he's deeply involved with Chabad. He's deeply involved with Donald Trump. He's deeply involved with Jared Kushner. They're all doing this. So there is something to this, whether it's all metaphorical and they're talking in coded Kabbalistic language, or they think they're actually doing it. What I actually believe 100% they're doing now is underneath Zorro Ranch and underneath St. Bart's, they're creating something to do with these women's eggs. Juliet Bryant told me, and has told me over and over again for 2 years straight, they weren't trafficking women. The only time she ever saw a woman trafficked, it was to Jeffrey for his own use. They were using those women for other things. Now, what you've got there as well is the blue butterfly, which is Lilith, the first Adam, wife of Adam. She is a shape-shifting demon who steals what? Babies.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Exactly. Pun fully
Exactly.
intended there. And just look, where else have we seen the blue butterfly recently? Did you pay attention to this Katy Perry nonsense?
I
By
did.
the way,
Yep.
the ex-wife of Russell Brand, right? The
Yep.
ex-wife of Russell Brand, another programmer out there in the field out there. But there's
It is.
just so many connecting of dots we could do here, Richard. First of all, Elon and Mars, he has this strange affinity for the planet Mars, and of course, it is symbolic, of course, like you're talking about. Another connection we could make, if you're saying Elon is going to be the one to provide judgment and take you to Mars or to punishment or judgment or whatever, you can look at another connection that we see out there just in the physical material world reality we see. Mars has a moon named Charon. Charon was the name of the boatman across the river Styx that takes you to judgment. So Is Elon invoking that archetype and the archetype of the moon attached to all of this as well? These things are ever prevalent in not only Kabbalism, but in the greater teachings of the various mystery schools themselves. This is all part of their secret doctrine, okay? And a lot of it is intended to be either metaphorical or metaphysical. Metaphysical things being the opposite side of the coin of physical things. So, physics is our material world science, metaphysics is the etheric science. That is the opposite side of the coin, that is the necessary precursor element to bring things into manifestation in the physical. So that is exactly what they're doing. They're invoking and leveraging those archetypes to bring into physicality the things they want to see. They know what they're doing. These are some dark occultists that run things at the top of the power structure that know about these principles, these old magical ways of thinking, and they leverage them in various ways and they use them against us, and they would prefer us be totally ignorant of it. And if we won't be ignorant of it, they would actually like for us to laugh it off and think it's a silly, nonsensical way of thinking. And that's what we've been indoctrinated to believe. But I assure you, these people, they know what they're doing. They know these natural energies they're invoking, and they leverage them against us all the time. And it's only by becoming aware that this stuff is going on that we could have any chance of fighting back against it. That's why we're here, Richard. We want to make sure people understand this stuff and know what it is that they believe and why they do the things they do, and more importantly, how they do the things they do. They're leveraging these principles against you. This synchromystic metadata field that I talk about is a very real thing. I don't think we have to really explore much else over the course of what we've seen the past couple of weeks to prove the proof of concept of it. I think we're seeing it manifest in real time, and we could see things emerging on the other side as a result of what it is that they're implanting into the greater information field, which I call the zeitgeist, because that means spirit of the time. And there is a spiritual component to it. It is something that comes from that metaphysical side. So they invoke this to bring about real world changes in the physical. And when you understand this, gives you a different view of things happening on the world stage, because they're invoking these archetypes to manipulate your unconscious mind to bring about conscious manifestation of those things at the end of all of it. So, certainly, we have all these connections. We see they do want to manufacture a new race of human beings, a Superman, an Ubermensch, the Uberman, the overman, as they sometimes call it, the transhuman, the post-human era. There's so many different terms that they've brought into being with this. And this, of course, falls back to the old archetype in the occult that they call the moon child. Why do they call it the moon child? Once again, I think you opened the show talking about that. It's about this reflection, the inversion principle. They want to take that which is good and righteous and holy and invert it and bring about this dark light, this shimmering darkness, the black sun ideology. All of those archetypes in play right there. It's about the inversion principle primarily, because that is how they could establish firm control over this physical reality, is by invoking that archetype and grasping onto that inversion principle to do so.
What they do, as well as to add to that, the book or the short story even that this Robert Ettinger wrote, it was called The Penultimate Trump. The penultimate Trump. It's absurd how much they put on these things, and again, they either look for people because his name wasn't Trump originally; it's Drumpf. So we know that wasn't his original name, but they try and fit it into the context of these things, as you say, to bring up these archetypes. They understand they're conjuring. That's exactly what they're doing. They're conjuring this stuff up, and the more things they can get on point, the better or the more chance it becomes a reality. They understand the nature of reality, which we all understand, really. They've just taken that knowledge from us, and that's what you do with the alchemical tech revolution. So it was the penultimate Trump. Now, this blue butterflies you mentioned just before was Katy Perry. She was on this blue, the Shepherd rocket taking the lambs to slaughter. Never went anywhere, quite clearly even. But Jeff Bezos, his Blue Shepard rocket, at very point in there, she does a couple of signals. Now, she does the Caduceus signal, which is everybody thinks is the heart, the love heart signal, but actually it's the two snake heads together. That's what it actually means in the Kabbalah. And then she holds up a blue butterfly with the names of her song of her, I think, her greatest hits album. That's Lilith. She's telling you that's Lilith. Elizabeth, Lilibet, which is the name of, I think, Prince Harry's, one of Harry's kids. Lilibet. Elizabeth was called Lilibet. Elizabeth. It's the whole same thing. This is that first snake woman who was an equal to Adam. Now they, as you say, has flipped it, and they say that that snake woman, Lilith, who was the female aspect of Samael, so together they created the beast or Satan, was what slept with Eve and created us. But actually, it's the reverse. Or if there's no truth to it at all, they're still just using it as an archetype. So they see themselves as Adam and Eve, and us as Samael and Eve. But Samael can be seen as Lilith as well, because that's his female part. That's where you see all this androgyny, and you see this rainbow symbology with LGBTQ, because it's all under the same Kabbalah coding. It all fits back in. So the penultimate Trump was the name of that story, released in 1947, which is when Israel was founded. That's not an accident as well. And they take people to Mars to be judged. And the warden takes them to Mars to be judged. This is a very rich man who comes back after 300 years and found out he's paid for his own prison sentence. But there is a new world, but he has to go to Mars to live for all the things he's done for others. It's this eye for an eye. It's another inversion of that, or a twisting or bastardization of that. So these things are out there in all the films. They're taking off from sci-fi, these guys. And to me, it's absolutely fascinating. The more I look into this, the more I find out that they're doing the same thing over and over again. So the blue butterfly is really important. I think you're right. I think under Zora Ranch and St. Bart's, they are seeding another race of beings, or at least stockpiling eggs.
Well, they're definitely up to something, and they're all about modifying the human genome. They've spent countless dollars and countless amounts of time researching into this and trying to do something with this. And who knows how far they've gotten within the auspices of the military industrial complex's special access programs with this stuff. By and large, things we see as the cutting edge of technology in the mainstream circles today, well, these technologies were fully developed 30 to 50 years ago minimum within the auspices of these special access programs. So anything we see is exactly 30 to 50 years old. So even things like your cell phone, this was all perfected within the auspices of the military industrial complex before it was submitted for other secondary uses, open source uses in the public mainstream. This is what they call dual use technology. So first they find every possible militarized application of a new technology or science. And then after they put it through its paces, then they release it to the public for more commercialized uses. Therefore, this spy apparatus that you have in your pocket at all times, this was perfected way back probably in the 1970s, let's be honest about it, in the auspices of the military industrial complex. The only problem they had then was they didn't have broad enough infrastructure to actually use it to its full potential. But now that infrastructure is in place, and they can track and monitor everything you do. And their next step is to internalize this in the human body. And they're working feverishly to do so. And this all has to do with this transhumanist notion of things. And in order for them to successfully be able to apply these technologies into the body, they have to engineer man genetically to be more apt to receiving it, to be more compatible with it. And that is what we see going on with these massive geoengineering programs and vaccine campaigns around the world. All of these things modifying the atmosphere, modifying the genetics of all life on Earth, and trying to tie it into this grid. And of course, they're putting all this stuff in place right now as we speak. And people will say, put your tinfoil hat back on when I talk like this. But this is going on. It's been going on for a long time. And it's only just now that most people are beginning to recognize something's happening here. just like the old Buffalo Springfield song. Something's happening here. And we need to recognize the different pieces of the puzzle that are falling in place. And how do we do that? By and large, it's by looking at this information field that they would prefer us to ignore. And that's what I call the synchromistic metadata field out there, the zeitgeist. Looking at the spiritual or metaphysical component of this, because this is always the precursor state of what's coming next in the physical material world reality we live in. So when you see that, you see the data in the field, you could begin to make predictions based upon that to see what's coming next here in the physical world that most people accept. So it's a lot to be discussed here still. Richard, I'd love to hear more of your thoughts.
I think we've got a little problem there with the connection, but hopefully that'll pull through. Well, the other thing here is that Elon Musk's first child died, bless it, of SIDS in 2002, and it was 2002 that Juliet Bryant was being abused by Epstein and on the island and under Zorro Ranch. So maybe there's something to that worth looking into. But the St. Bart's thing's blown me away. We also know that he's been mocking the West by Cecius Maximus, his frog thing, and saluting where everyone thought it was a Nazi salute when it was an old Roman salute. So he's been clearly showing that they're trying to bring the West down, the Roman Empire down. These guys are Kabbalistic. I wouldn't even call them the Jewish faith because I think they hide behind that and they use that as a complete shield like the Rothschilds do. That's not really what they are. It's just in my opinion, it's just a front for them. If you look at the Chabad guys, clearly they're the Men in Black. This is a this is an intelligence operation when it comes to these guys. They're mobsters, so they're not really what they say they are at all. I've read a book that actually even the Mossad book up there that I'm reading, which is By Way of Deception, openly talk about New York being run and having a large portion of Mossad agents in there, and that was written in the 1990s. So they clearly have been there for a long time, running that and running that Israeli narrative through there as well. So we're not looking at even religion sometimes. We're looking at them using religion as a shop front to hide behind. And that's how they get people in. Where do you think your confessions are going when you're sitting in there and chatting to the bloke in the box? You can't see the other side. But that's just a way of giving away your deepest, darkest secrets so they can be used against you. It's the easiest way for them to grab intel on what's going on in the city. These things, I'm not saying that there's some really lovely, wonderful people in all religions and all faiths, but usually they're not at the top of the faith, and that's the issue. So now we've got a new pope, and he's possibly going to be called Paul. It looks like we're really speeding up with this stuff, but Rome is destined to fall, and I'm trying to get people to realize that the West is under a lot of danger, and that's including the US and the UK and Europe, because these guys need the Edomites to fall after the temple's built, and they keep blaming the Islamic faith. That's just a. I'm not saying that they don't do some horrific things. I'm sure I know they do. The terrorist cells are like any terrorist cells. I've just read a book, a quite popular book about an MI5 agent, and all he talks about in it is the operations his MI5 unit performed against Islamic extremists. Not a mention of Israeli sects and extremists at all. Not to mention, it's all Islam, all Islam. And obviously, we don't know who this guy is. He's behind a fake name, I would assume. It's a good book. It's interesting to see how they go around it, but it's clearly fostering up this East versus West. Islam is the baddie, and I don't agree with a lot of their faith. Clearly, they're circling the big block there and creating the rings of Saturn. They're being used too, but it's all to deflect from what Israel are doing, and it's not the Israeli people. Again, they're being used as a shop front. This Kabbalistic, and you said the Gnostic stuff fits into it as well, and that's all comes back from old Egyptian mythologies. So they've kind of put all this stuff together and pick the greatest hits of lunacy. So people say like Gnostics is bad and pagan is bad, and you're like, well, it reaches into every corner of everything. If you're going to go that far, you can't be
Exactly.
that blatant with it.
Exactly. And just a couple of key points here. You're absolutely spot on when you say they've actually taken the religion of Judaism and hidden behind it. in order to stave off any criticism of what they're doing. That's not who these people are. So there's a lot of people out there that are saying it's the Jews. The Jews are behind all of it. No, it's not the Jews, the people who practice the Jewish religion, or the people who live in Israel. That is not the people that are to blame for all of it. There are a group of people that are using them as a shield of operations, just like in every other sect of society. You have the same thing going on with Islam. You have those extremists and terrorists and stuff working within Islam to do the same thing, and they all follow this secret doctrine. This is the cult of the Ismailis, which go back to the cult of the assassins and the Rashidiyah and all of these things. And it is within those groups that some of these sciences of mind control technology have been perfected and have been ported over to more Western ideologies like Christianity and Judaism and all of these other Abrahamic type faiths that they use as a front to protect them from criticism, to deflect blame to other people. And certainly that's what we see going on. Now, there's a portion of this that falls into all these different camps. But right now, we have centrally located this group that seems to be Israeli centric. And that's because that's where a lot of the intelligence apparatus of this world operate from. It's Mossad, it's CIA, it's MI5, MI6, even so much as the Russian intelligence even is all part and parcel of that, the KGB. It all falls under the same umbrella group. All these groups work together. This intelligence circle that works in this world and operates, these are not independent nations. Yes, they have their own fronts for intelligence operations and stuff like that, but they all know each other. They're all interconnected, and they all belong to the same secret society groups. And that's what they don't want you to understand or get your mind around. They know what each other are doing. They're working together. They constitute what many have described as a breakaway civilization. And I think that's probably the most apt description of this. This is what you call the deep state. This is what people call the cabal. And of course, these people pick that term for themselves because it's a poke in your eye, the cabal. They use the principles of Kabbalah to manipulate you. It's the cabal. And I hate that term because that's what they want to be known as. And of course, this falls back into the phonetic Kabbalah idea. Cabal, cube, the cube of Saturn, the cube, the Kaaba in Mecca. All these ideas are all interconnected. It's all the same thing. It's all based on this secret doctrine of these secret society groups that is called invariably, among other things, Kabbalah, Gnosticism, uh, Hermeticism. They use all of these old foundations, these old alchemical and natural sciences, but they've inverted them in the modern era, and they weaponize them against people for the purposes of maintaining control and power themselves. And it's only a small select group that does this, and they operate through the intelligence agencies internationally and through the secret society groups internationally. And they've penetrated into all portions of society, and they've even weaponized religion against the people. And that's what they hide behind oftentimes. And then they come out and they say religion is the reason why we have so many problems in this world. They use that as a crutch to fall back on, and they falsely blame religion for all of the different conflict in the world, holy wars and stuff like that, when behind the scenes it's always been agent provocateurs with political agendas who do this and use religion as a shield. So this is what we need to get our heads around. So you can't blame religion, and that's what people do. They blame religious differences for all the problems in the world, and then they turn their eyes away from spiritual things because of this. This is how cleverly this has all been crafted in this world, how they've intellectually turned people away from spiritual concerns by weaponizing this stuff against us. And that's not the case. That's not what religion was meant to be. It was not any spiritual type concern. It is not meant to be a dividing factor. But once again, they've weaponized it as a dividing factor against people. And they've used it in this way, and they've hidden behind it and blamed that as the boogeyman problem when that's not the case. So we have all of this deflection going on. And of course, they're all trying to engineer the same thing. And it's all about this advent of the post-human state, the post-human template. There's a whole lot more we could go into, but we're running low on time here, I think, Richard. So maybe another episode we could talk about more of the post-human template and what it is they're trying to produce here.
Absolutely, we could, and it's quite clear. And I think Jeffrey Epstein is pivotal to this. Not him as a person, but what he was involved with is pivotal. Look into any advice I could give you. Look into St. Bart's. Look into the islands surrounding it. They even got a yellow submarine. Nod, nod, wink, wink. Crowley and the Beatles. There. There's everywhere. The Moonchild was written by Aleister Crowley, which is basically an earlier version of Rosemary's Baby. We had the Rosemary's Baby jest with the British royals. They've even called one of their children Lilibet after their nanny, who was Lilibet, which is Lilith, obviously. It's all there for you to see, and whether they're trying to tell you and get out of it themselves, because a lot of those people will be born into it and they'll be absolutely desperate to tell you, but they couldn't because they're what happened to their mum, Diana. That's what happens. So there's so much more we could go into, but this is a transhumanist agenda. This is a world to come, new world order, whatever you want to call it, new golden age. This isn't going to be a place where we want to live either. We will be connected to the grid. Um, where can people find your work, Wayne, and connect with you?
People could find me at www.alchemicaltechrevolution.com. Richard, how about yourself? Where can people find your work?
Most my work, video work, is on iconic.com, and you can find me on Some Make Inspire on Substack. Each week I try and put out a new article on there as well with all of this stuff. It's been absolutely great. Again, there's so much more we can dig into. Apologies for some of the connection issues if that's come across. But the information is there. You know that these guys are working to a template, and what's great, and I always say this, is that they have to stick to that because we've decoded the language. And once you decode the language, the only way that they can communicate with each other that we've decoded the language is to use the language. So we're all right. We'll be all right. We just got to get it done quicker.
Absolutely. It will be okay. That's the thing. It'll all work together for good. And I think it's very much apropos that we take apart this programming language that they use and we understand how it is that they leverage data against us. And it's not data in the traditional sense that we think of, but they want to very much make it that in the traditional sense. So they're taking this synchromistic type idea and they've applied it in the directions they have. And it's all about bringing things into physicality here. And I think we got their number, Richard. So they might have to start rethinking things.
I think we have as well, and I think a lot of us have. And they're starting to speed up because they clearly understand that people have got their number. Guys, we'll see you in a week, 2 weeks' time. Take care. Please share the podcast and support the work we're doing. Thank you.